Okay, I started a little early. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you for attending, and welcome to all of the people who are viewing this proceeding remotely. It's the December 14th, 2021 Planning Advisory Committee meeting, and I'd like to call a meeting to order, please. First, the second item on the agenda is land acknowledgement. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the traditional lands of the Acadia First Nation, part of Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So item 3, approval of the agenda. You have a mover for the approval? Councillor Cushing, seconder? Josh, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carried. Okay, item 4, approval of the minutes. 4.1, minutes from the PAC Aquaculture Learning Plan. We're a mover for that. Councillor Cushing, Lauren, yeah. Seconder? Mr. Mo, Warner, yeah. We have a mover, seconder, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. There is no business arising from the minutes. Item 6, items for discussion or approval, and item 6.1 is the only item on the agenda. It's the Planning Advisory Committee Agricultural Learning Plan report and recommendations. So I'll look to Caroline, our planner, to give us a presentation and make a recommendation to the committee. Oh, you're muted. Okay.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to approve screen. I'm on a different computer because the other one wasn't working. So, oh my gosh, it might not even let me.
We'll get there.
No, I can make my presentation, and maybe Jenny, are you able to share the document on screen? And I think the part I just wanted to zoom in on, if you don't mind getting it together while I'm presenting, is the 2 definitions. So if I could just have that part up on the screen, that would be really helpful. Okay, well, good evening, PAC. I am here despite some technical difficulties. We have had a very in-depth multi-day aquaculture learning plan exercise that we've just completed. And we gained so much information from that. We got to discuss the many opportunities that the aquaculture industry could bring to the municipality. We got to speak to the Department of Fisheries and Aquacultures about their jurisdiction when it comes to aquaculture operations and the many departments and organizations that are involved in their licensing process. We got to hear from aquaculture industry leaders about their process about their experience in the process for licensing within Nova Scotia, and some of the benefits and hindrances from an economic perspective of the different system designs. We've heard concerns from community members and other industries that are established within the municipality. And I don't know about you guys, and I think we grasped this at the beginning of the process, but what I learned from this really is that this is a considerable topic. There's so much when it comes to the aquaculture industry, and aquaculture is really difficult to define. Each operation can have very different scales, a different purpose. There can be different species and products involved, different types of operators and system designs. It's just an industry that seems to be constantly evolving and moving into the future, which can make it really difficult to plan for and to write legislation for. So tonight, what I'd like to do is maybe just try and take a step back. Now that we've absorbed all of that information, and there's a lot that came at us, I want to try and remind you about what your purpose is. So you guys are here as volunteers for the Planning Advisory Committee, and your role is to advise council on planning issues. So I'm hoping that'll help if we can focus specifically on what planning is and and the role of planning within the municipality. And your job is to inform council so they can make an informed, is to make a recommendation to council so they can make an informed decision. So we've spent a lot of time talking about our jurisdiction as a municipality when it comes to managing aquaculture operations, and the authority that is given through planning tools within the Municipal Government Act. So let's try and keep that in mind as we move forward. I also want to just remind you that we are here because we have received an application from a land property owner within the municipality who would like to operate a land-based aquaculture operation. So that is why we're here and why we're making this, understanding this and considering this application. And finally, I think something that has really stood out for me throughout this process is the concerns when it comes to how the existing policies are written, about the language and interpretation and how it's actually enforceable, and if it's even within the municipality's authority, the existing policies. So how can we reflect on that and maybe make some change to create better policy in the end? So this is a big application. We've separated it, and I think I'm gonna try and almost separate it again for you so that we can really try and make some decisions here. For this part of the application, what I want to do is sit back and think about, do we want to allow the aquaculture industry to develop within the municipality of Yarmouth? And if we do, what does that look like? What are our abilities here to regulate it? What would it look like? And what language should we be using in our policies? What's going to stand within our policies for the next 10 years and still be applicable? For me, I think what's really important here is that the exercise that you've gone through, the amount of time that's been spent on this and the learning experience, that be reflected in the municipal planning strategy. I think no matter what the decision is of council on this application, I think the fact that this time has been spent, this learning experience has been done, that should actually be written in your municipal planning strategy, that it should be in there about what everybody has gone through and learned, and then how a decision was made, so that it's clear in the future when new applications come forward and new considerations are happening. So staff have a good understanding about where the municipality of Yarmouth stands on aquaculture operations. So I've given you two options to consider here. And Jenny, if you could just scroll down right to the two definitions. Perfect. So sitting back and reflecting on all of this, and I've done a lot of thinking about it, I think the very key issue here, or the key decision that needs to be made, is this definition when it comes to land-based closed containment aquaculture operations. And within my report, I've gone through, the many reasons about how land-based closed containment aquaculture with the existing definition, how that can be interpreted and what that means, what it could mean, and where the jurisdiction could fall when it comes to this definition. So I think it needs to be changed. It does. So it's really considering, how we want to move forward and what kind of rules we want to have. So I've given two options here. The first is to just remove that closed containment terminology completely, which is what we've been talking about originally. And what I've done is just define land-based aquaculture operation as a facility that has been approved or is under consideration for the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture's land-based aquaculture licensing program. And I think from a language perspective and a definition that really, no matter how the industry evolves, it puts it back on however the province is regulating these types of operations within their authority. The second option kind of gets into more keeping that close containment terminology. And that's something I've heard people talk about as maybe an option, but instead of leaving it as is, it's defining it further so that we fully understand what that means as staff when we're enforcing it. So what I've done here is, again, I've leaned on the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture's licensing programs. I think it's really important to stick with how they're defining these aquaculture operations, because otherwise it gets very, very messy, and it's just constantly changing, and it's just Roger who's processing these applications and trying to understand all of this information. So for him to actually just see proof and evidence that a operation is going through that process, that would be the easiest method for him to look at one of these operations and consider it when they come in and make an application. And I've also used some language here to try and put what closed containment it could be, putting it back more on municipal jurisdiction. So we know that when it comes to waste products, the only time that the municipality has control over those products that are coming out of these facilities, is when they are going into a existing municipal service. So if it's going into your waste services, or if it's going into your wastewater systems, that's when you can have some control over what's being discharged. So that's where we've reflected back in this definition. I also try to give examples for staff when they're interpreting this about what kind of systems they would be, but not to be too stuck on defining based on a recirculating system versus open flow, because what we learned from the province is that as these industries change and these systems evolve, this kind of language can be difficult to even apply specifically to one operation, because they can be doing different things. So just trying to more have that concept in mind about what kind of operations would fit a closed containment aquaculture operation definition. So for the purpose of tonight, I think the only thing that we should be thinking about doing is making a recommendation for council about how we want to move forward when it comes to this. And not get too nitty gritty on language for the rest of the policies. Like, obviously we're going to need to define and write some more vision. We can put in a lot more specific policies with more control if we want to move forward with aquaculture. But I think for tonight, we would all just be absolutely exhausted if we had to go through that. So what I've done here is I've given you these two options. This is what we can talk about and consider tonight. And I'd like to see a recommendation made to council. And once council, what I'm suggesting or recommending here is that as a planning advisory committee, you make a recommendation to council. We'll bring it to council. They'll review your recommendation and provide their intent. They'll make a decision on where they want to go with aquaculture. And then from there, I'd like to see it come back to the planning advisory committee. And I know you're all exhausted, but I think that this will be the best way to come out with good policy, is that we'll get a decision on this higher arching vision stuff about exactly what we want to allow and not allow. And then we'll come back and sit down as a PAC, and we can do a little workshop, and we can talk about exactly what's within your authority and get really specific about details and language, if that's how we want to move forward, so that ultimately it's a policy that everybody's comfortable with. So I think that's it for me tonight. I hope I explained all of that well, and I'm gonna give it back to the chair to open up for discussion.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much, Carolyn, and excellent presentation. And we have a couple recommendations that you put forward to us that we can choose from, certainly, to recommend to council is the next step, essentially. So having said that, I'll open the floor to a potential motion or discussion. And okay, now I can see everybody. Warner, Mr. Kamal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like everyone around the table, I spent a lot of time thinking about this and getting information from the various experts. After going back and forth on things a few times in my mind, I'm prepared tonight, in order to start things moving, to recommend that or move that the Planning Advisory Committee recommend to Council that the land use bylaw definition 2751 be changed to the second option as presented by our planner.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kamal. We have a mover for the motion, stated. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Have a seconder for the motion? I will second it, put it on the table for discussion. Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder, discussion about the motion. Yes, Councillor Durkee.
Okay, folks, I'm going to come out and I'm totally going to be honest and express my heartfelt thoughts on this scenario. I would like to keep the closed contained aquaculture contained in our MPS. I know that the actual meaning of that may take different, may have different viewpoints. Here's my concern. I'm not against aquaculture. I think that's at some point the direction that we want to consider. What I don't agree with, and it's mentioned in here, is the hybrid recirculating aquaculture system. So it's some of the wording at this point. I do not want to see anything coming out of our ocean or anything going into our ocean. I do not want to see any water coming out of our lakes or any water going into our lakes from any type of farming scenario. So if we can make we need to continue to have control over what happens with our oceans and with water. I am in favor of closed contained recirculating systems, the RAS system, because it's proven that it works. It's proven that it's safe, and it's not going to affect our environment in any way. So I'm not sure how, if we can change what we've suggested to reflect my thoughts. I'm just throwing them out there. It's my personal thought. But that's where I'm coming from, that I support aquaculture, but not if it's going to affect our environment, particularly our water, in any way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durkee. Josh Trask. Mr. Trask.
Thank you. Just a quick question to Patty. If you are trying to say that we can't take anything out of the ocean or put anything back in the ocean, we just approved a lobster holding facility that does exactly that, like 2 months ago. So now we have to go back and get rid of that? Is that what you mean? Or are you talking specific to the Boreal thing?
I'm talking specific to salmon farmings or finfish farm that take water out and make changes to the actual water that's flowing in and out.
Oh,
I
excuse me,
understand.
Councillor Durkee, my apologies for interrupting. Can you repeat that? It may have been your internet or it might have been mine, but I didn't hear you.
Okay, so sorry, it could be mine. I have issues out here in Port Maitland. In a lobster holding facility, the water that comes in and goes back out is not treated. So in a farming, a fish farm, fin fish farming, the water is treated after it comes in, and it's treated on the way out. So that's the difference between the two. So I'm okay with lobster holding because there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no changes to the water that comes in and nothing added to it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Durkee. Yes, can folks use their hand function? That way I can know who's, and Josh, I'm assuming you're putting down your hand, are you? Okay, perfect. Yeah, Councillor Cushing. Oh, you're muted.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm still in favor of leaving the closed containment in place. I don't think it was fair to try to suggest or to compare finfish, plants, or shellfish. I don't think it was fair to compare all those in the same category as land-based aquaculture, number one. Number two, my understanding, correct if I'm wrong, that when we have trouble with freshwater problems, it's a phosphorus problem. In saltwater, it's a nitrogen problem. And by having a nitrogen problem, it's my understanding that a nitrogen-based algae would settle to the bottom, suffocating all seabed creatures of harvesting, such as bloodworms, clams, periwinkles, and perhaps even seaweed. So these are some of the reasons why I don't want to change that containment right now. A lot of the research, from my understanding too, has been with freshwater. And that's not, we're talking about saltwater. Another reason is, where have I wrote it down here now, if I get it right. Open pen farms have to put a security bond up front to try to mitigate any problems that they may have in the future. And it was my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's nothing in place for land-based farms if something goes wrong. Next, if something does go wrong, the damage could be devastating to what we already have. Next point, we already have a multi-million business in sea harvest, whether it's lobsters right down to the periwinkles, the seaweed, to bloodworms, clams, etc., and etc., and etc. So I can't see us approving a land base at this time. My understanding, I've heard from both sides, pro and con, and it was even brought up to me that across the bay in Maine, that they're moving ahead with land-based and fish farms, open pen and whatnot over there, and they're enjoying it. But the government has approved. But what I also hear on the Maine shore, that there's a lot of resistance to that from the public and fishers in that area and in those areas. So that to me tells me I think we should be, from what I've read, and between Inca, Dan Earl, and what was the other lady's name? Oh, Anna Mallon. They had some pretty good information there. And in our strategic plan that we have, we do encourage diversification in the fishing industry, but we also encourage preservation of our coastline and our marshlands and other areas that we relate to the Chabot Point property. So after some careful thought and trying to understand as much as I could about this whole change in language, this is my opinion and my opinion only, that I think we should leave the land or the closed containment language as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question to Caroline before we start. So option one removes any responsibility from the environment from the municipality, and option two would limit it to anything that was taking from, say, a water, like I guess that would be town water, and put into a sewer system managed by the municipality. So all other water sources, lakes, rivers, whatever, would be outside of our responsibility. That clarify? Is that clear?
Yes, so that is regulated by the province. That would go to the Department of Environment. If there was any discharge going into a water body that's not ocean, it's covered by the Department of Environment.
So, okay, so follow up to that, I guess, you know, we have learned a lot throughout this process, but, you know, when we first started this, the environment was our main concern. The document provided tonight kind of just passes that responsibility on. We know that our current MPS tells us that we have the right and the responsibility to think about our environment before we make any of those changes and how that would affect our community. Right now is the only time that you can do that. Once you've changed this, you're right, it does kind of pass the buck to them. But it was still our main concern. It's still the concern of our residents. In the briefing, it talks about the eel facility and why the original language was put in there. And our initial reaction to this, and the same for the community, is still the same as the eel farm and preventing the release of any substance into our natural environment. That's still a priority for our residents, and I don't see that within these two recommendations. So on top of that, I still have concerns about allowing large industrial sites in our rural areas. When the new application was brought forth to PAC, we focused like directly on the changes needed to get that specific facility in, and not necessarily on how it affects the entire municipality. Like, this change means you can put salmon farm or hatchery on any water source in any anywhere in Yarmouth County. And you know, it also, I think, mentions in there, we've talked about a development agreement in length, but that's not completely true, because I don't know exactly what a development agreement looks like, who develops, who creates it, and who has final say on it. And to me, that's only as good as the people around the table, and the environment is important to me. So I am not in support of this motion.
Caroline, before I go to Mr. Camo, did you want to respond?
I just thought I'd answer the questions just for clarity, if that's okay, Mr. Chair. I don't want to.
Certainly, yes, yeah. And I'm just having you skip the queue a little bit because you're responding to the person who's
Sure.
Councillor Hilton,
So
who's just.
and I know, like, we've gone over this with multiple applications this year, and we've talked about it a lot, but it gets complicated with planning. So I can give a refresher here. So I'm sorry, I don't want to be talking too much, but the municipality of Yarmouth, when you did your municipal planning strategy 10 years ago, what you decided was that you would have very specific areas that would be classed with, that would have zoning. So you have some hamlets, you have your business park, you have a few commercial areas, some purely residential areas, but they're very few. And then what you decided was that everything else would be rural development. And how that works is that council anticipated that this area, because it's blanketing, it covers most of the municipality as rural development, is that because people are going to come forward and want to do other things there besides residential in your rural development zone, that's why you've created your rural industrial zoning and your rural commercial zoning. And those are zoning options. If anybody wants to do anything in development in the rural development zone, they have to come in with an application to rezone. So if they want to, and tonight you would have had an application on your, but unfortunately it got held, you'll have it next month. There would have been an application for a spa. Someone wants to open a small spa. So that is the same, in that situation, that's still not allowed in your rural development zone. Instead, they have to come through with an application for rezoning. It would come to you as the PAC and you would consider that application. Every single commercial industrial use has to be considered this way. No matter what we do with aquaculture, it will always be that way for everything that happens in your rural development zone. So that would have to be rezoned. In addition to that, some uses are considered even more, that they require even more consideration, or that they may need additional rules. And that's where your development agreement comes in. So if somebody wants to operate something industrial within your rural development zone, and this could be anything. So we're talking about a farm, A farm would be considered industrial and is often typically in a rural development area. So if somebody wants to open a farm, they would come to me and Roger with an application. And the first thing they would want to do is rezone that piece of property to rural industrial. And the second thing they'd want to do is apply for, and maybe the farm is a bad example because I'm not sure that this one does need it. So for aquaculture, you would then apply for your development agreement. And so how a development agreement works, in addition to the rezoning, is that applicant would then sit down with myself and other members of the municipal staff, and we would write legislation that would be registered against that specific property. So we would sit with them and we would go back and forth. We'd say, these are the concerns of council. These are the rules that we're allowed to enforce based on the way the municipal planning strategy is written. This is what the municipality wants. And that business owner would say, well, this is what I need. And out of that, we come up with a legal document with rules. And that document then comes to you as the planning advisory committee. So to Nick's point, the person who reviews a development agreement is you. It's going to come back to you guys. You're going to go over it and you're going to be comfortable with it and you're going to make a recommendation to council. And from there, it will go to public hearing, council again for second reading, and then it's registered on the property as a binding agreement that stays with the life of that property. So that's what we're talking about here. So this language doesn't just open everything up. All it does is open up a consideration. It allows you to be considered, and it always comes back to you. That's how your planning documents are written, and it doesn't matter what it is, whether if it's a commercial or industrial use and it wants to happen in the rural development zone, it has to come to the planning advisory committee for consideration. So I hope that answered those questions, okay? And if you have any more, please ask, because I want to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about tonight.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Kamal. Chair recognizes Mr. Kamal. Yeah.
Thank you. I guess I'm a bit on the other side of the fence on this one. I've got some concerns if we leave the wording the way it is and don't move forward. Number one, the population of Yarmouth County, other than a slight blip during COVID, is not growing. As a matter of fact, it's been going down over the last 10 to 15 years. So we need to find some ways in order to stem that decline. What we're doing if we don't change things is we're effectively closing the door on an industry that would help diversify our economy and start turning things around for us. We can't keep closing doors. We've got to look forward somehow and then move forward a bit. Another thing, if we leave things the way they are, we are ignoring the current state of the agriculture industry, and we're also ignoring any future improvements in practices and technology in agriculture. So we're shutting out anything that could happen in the future. So we've got to be more forward thinking in this. Also, I think we're right now talking outside of our sphere of influence and our sphere of expertise by trying to regulate agriculture. That falls to the provincial government and the federal government under various arms. We're simply here to decide whether or not we want to see an industry grow and help grow our community. We should not be trying to regulate the industry. We should be helping the regulators move forward. So I guess those are my thoughts. I might have a few others, but I've gone back and forth on this several times, and I really think we need to start moving forward in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kamal. Mr. Trask, Mr. Kamal, do you have can you put your hand down? Councillor Cushing. There we go.
Okay, excuse me. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, on your allowing me to speak again. I hear loud and clear what Mr. Kamal was talking about, and I think it's a little, again, it's his opinion and what he thinks. I don't think we're closing the door on anything. We're asking for close containment that I believe the future technology will be there. And as for our population shrinking, can you imagine how much it would shrink if we lose our present sea harvest industry that we presently have? So I think it's, you know, I don't think we should be, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't think we should be in fear of reducing our population anymore unless we destroy what we already have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Trask.
I think I agree with Warner 100% that I think this is an opportunity for us to expand on what we have. And what we have is access to the ocean. The future of sea products and aquaculture is going to be farming on land. The studies are showing that lobsters disappear. It's not in New York anymore. It's not in Boston anymore. We've heard all this stuff. Climate change is real if you believe in it. And the lobsters are going to disappear. And we have to talk to these businesses and industries that want to be the future. I think that a lot of it is fear mongering. We have open pen salmon farmings now all around us, and we still have lobsters. I think that there's a very small, noisy bunch that are sowing a seed of fear, and they're going to tell you that everything is going to disappear. Everything else, it's not. I don't believe that's true. It's not true. I think that this hybrid system that they're planning, they're capturing most of the bad things that open pen salmon farms don't even try to capture. I think that keeping the second option allows us to stay with technology, and as technology grows, I agree that, you know, it might not be perfect just yet, but we have to move forward. And I think that it's a pretty good proposal that's here in front of us right now. I think that there's a lot of ifs and buts, and let's not tip over the apple cart type thing. I don't believe any of that's true. I think that this proposal is fun, and I don't think anything bad will ever happen if we accept it.
Thank you, Mr. Trask. Ms. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you everyone for your very thoughtful reflections. And it has been an intense and a very great learning experience. I have gone back and gone through all the different recordings and whatnot, and it's not an easy, it's complicated. I think for me, what is happening is without a vision, and I know we're in the process of working with Uplands, our partner, in creating a vision and carrying the MBS forward for the next 10 years. But it's very difficult to kind of take this and then what would that vision be? I'm all about certainly aquaculture, supporting that industry. I think it's a way of the future, but it needs to be done in a safe and sustainable manner. And I look at things from a risk management perspective. So definitely the closed containment is where I'm sitting for sure. Caroline, and maybe this is a question more around process, and I just want to make sure that I completely understand it. So if I can ask a question. So if we were to make a recommendation tonight, and that would go to council, because I think in the very opening part of your report, and I apologize, I have it here, because you're indicating that we need to have a clear statement within our MPS to reflect the exercise undertaken, as well as shows council full intent when it comes to the agricultural development and operation. So how do those interface with each other?
So honestly, I wasn't sure where you guys were going to go with this tonight. I wasn't sure if we were going to move forward with the with recommending the application be approved with a definition, or if it would be recommended that this not move forward. So I didn't want to, and I also didn't know what the vision here was, what the perspectives would be if you wanted to see aquaculture, what it would look like, those kind of things. We haven't we've talked about aquaculture a lot. We haven't actually sat down and said, this is what would be ideal. So instead of wasting time putting my ideas and my thoughts, I thought it would be better to just put in, if you look into your report, I have highlighted bold words where I think you should insert your vision statement into the MPS, and where you could put some really specific policies into your land use bylaw, but I haven't written them. I've taken a lot of stabs at writing them over the last, few months, but I think what would make the most sense is saying, okay, we want a vision statement there. We want to, if we're going to approve this with this definition, this is how we want to move forward. If council agrees, I think the best thing to do is come back and for all of us to just sit down and talk about it. Talk about, what you've been through and what your vision is and where your values are, what's important, and let's figure out exact wording that you are supportive of and that everybody can agree on.
So, I totally support aquaculture. I think it's a growing industry, and I support what, Warner is saying in terms of bringing business and industry into our county. For me, what's difficult is there is no vision. And so we're making a decision based on a lack of thoughtful, strategic vision into the future to do it in a safe and sustainable way.
Yes, Councillor Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to say thank you to all the members of the PAC for all the time that and staff for all the time that has been put forward to dealing with these with this situation. Two terms that have come forward tonight. One is application and the other is proposal. And right now, I just want to make sure that the application that has been come forward on with Boreal salmon is something that's in the background at the moment, because what we are looking at is all of the municipality right now and our vision as Patty was stating. So what concerns me is that, we haven't really sat down and said, okay, if we want to entertain aquaculture as an industry in Yarmouth, where could we foresee that going? Where do we want to see it happening? And as Patty has also mentioned, we have to make sure that's sustainable and that's not going to affect our rural residential areas and our beaches and our lakes again. So it comes down to risk and whether or not we are willing, what kind of risk that, we're willing to take. There's mixed reviews around the world about aquaculture and the effects it has on the environment. And that's what concerns me most is, yes, I would like to see aquaculture as a new industry in our area, but at what risk? And moving forward, I'm concerned that, again, we need to really sit down and say, what is it that we want to happen here? What kind of aquaculture do we want? We know that Argyle has aquaculture. They've created an area for aquaculture that has to do with shellfish, and that's happening in the water. And that's okay because that's sustainable. But we need to define that. What kind of aquaculture do we actually want? And I don't think that we've done that yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is kind of a question to staff. So this kind of seems like the cart before the horse. We're coming up with definitions before council has given a vision statement. So is it possible to table this until council provides a vision of what they want to see for aquaculture in our municipality? Because we keep putting this on the PAC members to decide, but we know that it goes back to council. So maybe council could provide some direction.
Sorry, Councillor, your connection froze. I don't know if it was you or me, or if you just repeat what you said. My apologies.
I'm assuming it's you.
That probably is, yeah.
I guess I'm asking the CAO, can we table this until council provides some direction on what the vision is? I said I feel like this is making a definition before we know what council's vision of aquaculture is going to be makes, it's the cart before the horse kind of thing. So can we table this, take it to council meet and, come up with that vision and then provide via PAC with what they think they want to see?
Mr. Chair, we've received a legal opinion on this process with respect to Councillor Hilton's question, so I would request that we go in camera so I can debrief with the PAC.
Okay, and so I'll need a mover for moving in camera.
So Jenny, that means the people who are not panelists, we'll have to invite them to leave, and then maybe we'll just put a post out there on Facebook when they can join back in.
Okay, thank you. So I think I
Can
had
you
a
just-
mover and Nick in a
Sorry.
seconder and Warner, sorry. Go ahead.
Can you just give me a few minutes so I can figure this out?
Certainly, yeah.
So when it says, when I go to remove one of the attendees, it says that they're not able to join webinar. They're not able to rejoin again. So I think maybe the best bet is I'll remove them all. We will stay on, and then I'll have to create a new webinar and post it on our Facebook page for them to rejoin. That's the only way that this is going to work.
Sure, yep, we need them to be able to rejoin, Jenny. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Jenny. So Jenny, perhaps when you get that done and we've got a mover and a seconder, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. So we'll just wait on Jenny. When she's ready, she'll tell us that we're alone and in camera. Yes, hello. Just a reminder to everybody that we're in camera and that there should be no phones or texts coming in and out during the in-camera session.
I just have one that's not, I'm clicking remove, but they're not leaving. What's up, Victoria?
you're
Sorry,
muted.
you're muted, Victoria.
As the admin, you can click on and remove them.
Yeah, I am, but it's not, it's saying once removed, they will not be able to join. I click OK and nothing's happening. It's not taking them off.
Ms. Atwood, if you could please leave so that we can move forward, it would be appreciated. And like I say, we will definitely reissue a link when we come out of in camera.
I could just create a new link webinar now.
Can't you just have the same, can't you just have the same one, close this one, and just let the people that are panelists in?
No, it doesn't work that way, Nick, when it's a webinar, because they can jump on without being
Okay.
administered. You can
Oh.
just,
Oh, they're
Oh,
gone.
wait, they're gone.
Yeah.
Okay,
Perfect,
let me
thanks.
just do one last check.
and you have to stop recording too, Jenny.
Yeah.
Have a motion on the. Okay, good, thank you. So we're back live. Sorry, everybody, for the delay. We saw the legal opinion in camera and so forth, and we're back, and hopefully everybody's been able to rejoin us. The technology does present some challenges, as we're all well aware. So having said that, we left off. We had a motion on the floor to accept the second definition, and my understanding is that this is largely to clear up confusion around closed containment and align it with the industry and some federal legislation and so forth. So that's my understanding. If that's incorrect, correct me. Okay. So we have a mover and a seconder. Do we have additional speakers? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. We've got 3, 4. All those against? And 4 against. Motion defeated. Okay. So I guess there hasn't been a recommendation brought forward to council. You know, I'm chair, and recommendations, and so you know, we'll certainly notify council that the motion was defeated, and we'll schedule our next meeting for January the 18th. That is the third Tuesday in the month of January. I think that's correct. 7 o'clock. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And there being no further business, I'll look for an adjournment. The remover by Nick, seconded by Josh. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everybody. It was a good conversation. Okay, bye-bye.